Electric Utility Board will come to order in open session.
City Council will reconvene in open session.
Item 6 on the agenda is a public comment period. We don't have anyone signed up for public comment this month, so we'll go directly to item 7, which is the update and report by the Director of Electric Utilities or his designee regarding customer service, business center practices, procedures, and policies, billing procedures, and LP&L staffing and performance.
I'll take the first part of this, and then Blair will talk about distribution and production. Just a few things I wanted to point out. As we always do, we have a rate comparison, and on that first chart right there, you see that we continue to be lower than the state average. State average is $100 per 1,000 kWh usage. Today we stand at $89.21. A large part of it has to do with us lowering our purchase power pass-through starting February 1st. Some other entities have been looking to do that, namely XL Energy has put in to lower their fuel costs for the same reasons that we lowered ours. But they also have put in for an 8.5% base rate increase. And as we state later in this report, that is significant because, as we know, our base rate is 30% of our total rate. Our purchase power pass-through is 70%. XL Energy, SPS, they have more of a blend where it's 50-50, where they have some of their pass-through that's in their base rate and some of their pass-through that's a straight pass-through. So when we talk about our 5.75% adjustments in the past few years, that only affects 30% of our rate. But when they talk about an 8.5% base rate increase, they're talking about 50% of the rate. So it's more substantial. So we anticipate that our rates will remain at or below the state average for a period of time going forward. And we know that looking on the chart on the second page, it is a straight comparison with SBS that we are almost $10 below them for the same amount of usage, and we expect that that'll continue for some time. If you look at the public communications recap, pretty much all of our communication kind of key indicators and factors stayed the same. One key area of increase was that on our 2019 education page, under the FAQs, we saw a 60% increase. That could be to the heightened communication that we're doing about the connected project. It could also be other entities that are participating in the Houston project coming to our website to get information. If you look at the business office recap, there were really two things that I want to highlight. One of them is that if you look under payment arrangements, you'll see that right now approximately 88% of our customers that utilize our payment arrangements do it for free, either over the IVR or increasingly through the website. You see that only 11.5% had a live customer service rep process that. That was a big change that we made a couple of years ago, that we were able to bring online payment arrangements on board so that customers could utilize that service without having to talk to a live person.
Matt, what percentage of our customers need payment arrangement or take advantage of any kind of payment arrangement?
I don't know. I don't know. We can certainly get you that number.
That's fine.
But yeah, we'll include that next month.
That would be helpful.
Okay. Yes, the last thing that I'll highlight in this area is that we show that calls in the call center are continuing a downward trend, but I think that also has to do with the season. I would anticipate that calls will probably increase in the May to June time period, partly because of increased usage coming in the summer months, raising customers' bills. I would also say probably tends to do with tech students moving in and out, because we always see a spike in September and May as they move in and out. finally, LP&L cost refunds totaled $75,134. Over the past 5 months, LP&L has refunded approximately $2 million in deposits to our customers. And of course, that was a policy that this board changed a few months back, allowing customers who have had good service for 12 months to get automatically refunded their deposit as opposed to having to call to us to do so. So that's all I have for the business office. We'll get Blair if you want to.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, engineering department, just got to go over to page 16, distribution recap. Engineering department issued 32 new projects. There's 88 active commercial projects. That's up about 6 from February. Over to page 19, the overhead department completed 12 jobs. Underground was about 8. Also in March, we completed the upgrade of McDonald substation. We got a new 200 MVA transformer set up, breakers, switches, and things like that upgraded. It is in service. Distribution also worked 195 outages during March. That's up about 60 from February. Page 20, the production recap. Massengale, Brandon were available in the market. The only really change is steam unit 1 and 2 at Cook, removed from the market as of April the 1st. And that was discussed last board meeting as well. And that's all I have. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Rose?
I have a question for Mr. Rose. On this figure that you have for the cost of electricity, what is the amount if you include taxes and franchise fees?
I don't.
Can you get that for us, Chad?
Ms. Joy, are you referring to the 8920?
I'm referring to 10 and 11 both.
So how much of that average rate includes?
No, this is, what we have here is cost of electricity only. I want to know how much how much the total is with taxes.
Are you talking about pilot as well as the state tax?
Yeah.
Well, we don't
Franchise
we don't
and
normally
pilot.
include that because it's going to differ from entity to entity. So this is how the PUC reports that this is the apples to apples. So this will be your rate with that taken out of it. We can certainly find what ours is.
I need to know what it is
Absolutely.
with.
It's about 20%. Yeah.
When there's franchise added and pilot added, and then the city taxes on top of that.
Right. It's about 20%.
Tax on tax.
Okay, y'all check on that too. That is correct.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Item A, discuss financial and capital statements, financing options, audits, and financial policies of Local Power and Light relating to debt issuance issues, reserve account funding, cost allocations, and revenue expense projections of Local Power and Light. Mr. Sutton.
Well, Mr. Rose hit about 3 of my talking points in his, so I'll skip over those. He's talked at great length about our rates and where they are and where they compare to Excel. We're about $9 cheaper, and if you'll recall, we switched over to a lower pass-through rate and effective February 1st, went from about $101 down to $89. So, per the tariff, we are supposed to report the over-under collection to you on a monthly basis. The black line being perfectly collected. Towards the end there, you can see that we're over collected, and for some reason, when I put this on a presentation, the dates show up as numerical values instead of dates. But you can see the highest green peak is January, and then in February we gave back about $300,000. In March, surprisingly, we over collected about $100,000, and that's largely due to the fact that when we set the new lower pass-through rate, we were looking at gas prices that were about $2.36 an MMBTU, and in February they were $2.05, and in March they were $1.78. So I just can't keep up with falling gas prices. But keep in mind that we always reevaluate these in May and October, so we'll look at this again in May to see if we need to do another adjustment. So quickly, the balance sheet is on page 21 of your backup. Looking at February year-to-date through compared to fiscal year end, you can see that the cash and receivables are pretty much a wash. On the asset side of the balance sheet, restricted investments are down about $3.2 million, and that's simply, those are bond funds that we have drawn down and put towards capital projects. And then capital assets, you can see, are down about $2.3 million. Our depreciation right now is outpacing our construction progress. On the liability side, liability and equity side of the balance sheet, you can see the new line item that we added in January, the deferred revenues. You can see this ties back to the chart I showed you on the over-under collection. Through February, we were over-collected $8.4 million, and we started making that entry monthly, so that would show up on the financials rather than a year-end entry. Matt talked about briefly the customer deposits. Since October 1st, when we entered into that new policy where we give it back if you meet certain requirements, we've given back about $2 million, but we have new customers that come on that still require deposits. But the net impact there is about $1.5 million back into the community and off of our balance sheet. Bonds payable, we paid our February debt payment, so that was $4.1 million in principal that's out the door. And the interest obviously hit the income statement. And then you can see net position is negative $4.9 million, and I'll talk more about that on the income statement. You can see that our revenues are down about $8.2 million compared to the same time last year. I've highlighted it there in black at the top. But what this shows is, if you look at the purchase of fuel and power, it's also down $8.1 million, which that gives me some comfort that our pass-through model is working, that those two numbers are moving together. So then it begs the question of, we were $2 million operating at a deficit of $2 million at this time last year. Why is it 4.9 this year? So since our revenues are moving as anticipated, it really becomes a question of expenses. The first issue is personal services. You can see it's up about $600,000. That's largely due to labor costs in our distribution department. And then we've also filled some vacancies throughout the organization that were vacant this time last year. Supplies, maintenance, and other. We have, in February, we ran the Brandon and Massengale plants through our power marketer, and in order to do that, we have to pay that power marketer to procure gas on our behalf. So we've seen some increases there. The cook units were called on by Excel in February, and I confirmed with our production superintendent that we used 3 times more water through February this year than we used pretty much all of last year because those units were called on. So that issue will subside, as we know, as of April 1st. The steam units will be mothballed, so the water usage there should go down. Another driver in that category is our engineering study that we have done with PWR on the interconnection study. So those are the big drivers. Depreciation and amortization I've already kind of touched on. Our non-operating expenses is driven largely by our interest expense for debt that we issued last year, so we would anticipate that to be up. And then transfers, that's up due to our budgeted increase for WTMPA admin costs, and then our payment in lieu of taxes and franchise fees are also increased as a result of our over-collected state. So as we give back that over-collection over the summer, we won't collect as many revenues, and so that will kind of work itself out. So all of that to say, our expenses are about 2.6 million higher than they were at this time last year. And if you were to back that 2.6 million out of that $4.9 million number, we're basically in the exact same place that we were last year, 2.2 million deficit. And so just to give you some context, I know those are big numbers going in the wrong direction, but every February I kind of have a stroke because I forget that we operated a deficit through February. And typically we don't start seeing it ramp back up until May, June, July when it gets hot. But for some context, in February of 13, we had a deficit of 4.1 million. In 14, it was 1.4 million. Last year, it was 2.2, and this year, it's 4.9. So this is not territory that we've never seen before. But it's just a little alarming every February when I see this, the first time I review it. So with that, we always show you the budget comparison. This is basically the cash basis. How are we comparing? So we're 33% on expenses and 30% on our revenues, which is normal. I've shown you last year's numbers. The expenses at this point in the year typically outpace revenues. The biggest driver, $5 million deficit here, is the fact that we paid debt, $4.1 million in February. So in terms of the capital program, we've got 44 open capital projects. We've got $49 million in terms of remaining funds. About 24% of that is in cash, with the remaining 76% in bonds. Distribution was the only department that had any capital expenditures in the month of February, and they spent about $1.9 million, and that was spread over 12 projects. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Mr. Sales, how likely is it that the labor portion there's maybe some capitalizable labor in that?
Yeah, it's very possible, and that's something that we could look into. We can certainly research that and get back to you guys next month. And if we find that some of that should be capitalized, we just make a journal entry and move it to the appropriate capital project.
Other questions? I think all of you are aware we normally run a deficit through about April, sometime in May, with summer usage. Creates a turnaround.
We typically do about 60% of our revenues in the last 4 months of the year.
Anybody else have a question, comment? Thank you, Mr. Sewell. That would bring us into item 9.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kessler.
that item was on the agenda for last month. And Mr. Dunbar forwarded some issues and questions that he'd like addressed. We addressed those issues largely and sent them back over to the county for consideration. We have yet to hear from them. In order for this item to not fail, we would need to continue for our next regular schedule.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dunn.
I'll move that we table item 9 until the next meeting.
Table or continue? Continue.
Continue.
Okay. Continue. Second by Mr. Bell. It's a non-debatable motion, if I remember, non-discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll continue that till the next month's meeting. Okay, so then we'll go on to number 10. Receive a report and discuss underground utility locations and relocation activity and electric customer connections related to downtown redevelopment activities.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rice?
I'd ask this be put on the agenda, but I don't believe we need to have any discussion about it when we move on.
So we will pass over item 10. And also item 11, due to the illness of McCullough. I guess the proper way to do that would be to continue that up to the next,
If that's the board's desire, yes, sir.
so I would entertain a motion to continue that. Okay, so, Mr. Tucker seconded, motion by Mr. Bell, second by Mr. Tucker. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. So then that brings us to the consent agenda. Items 12 through 16. And I forget, Mr. Casper, do I need to read all those or?
I believe so, would be sufficient.
I think,
Was anything before?
has anybody requested
Not that
that?
I'm aware of, Mr.
Before any of those items? Okay, I think there's some rejection of bids, and then there's some approvals of different bids. And I've read through that, I assume everyone has read through those different proposals, so I will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second by Mr. Tucker, motion by Mr. Goodman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That brings us to the end of the agenda, and we will be adjourned.
Council's adjourned.